Hello everyone, and welcome to Hopeful Moments 1. Today, we will hear the story of the struggles and challenges a mother faces after her husband passes away and she becomes a widow at just 20 years old. She then has to grapple with the issues of single parenting, coping with the pain of loss, and dealing with mental health problems, including battling alcohol cravings and anger issues. Today's story will take you through a surprising turn of events. The actions of Andrew after he returns from visiting a friend in Ohio. While Andrew had previously been wonderful with the protagonist's daughter and portrayed himself as an ideal partner, after meeting a friend with a very conservative view of women, he changed. If you find this story interesting and full of meaningful lessons, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to learn more valuable lessons. My ex-husband now thinks that I've hurt my daughter, and this has led him to continuously harass me. He accuses me of stealing his only daughter, even though the truth is, he is not Sammy's biological father. These words, although absurd and full of hatred, still cause me pain. Especially since he doesn't understand my circumstances and fails to see that I am fighting every day to be a good mother, despite everything having changed so drastically. I am 27 years old, and I was once a young woman full of hope for the future. But life took away something very important from me when Mike, my husband, passed away when I was just 20. He passed away due to severe complications after a cancer surgery. For me, his death was not just the loss of a spouse, but also the collapse of all the dreams I had for a complete family. Mike passed away when our daughter Sammy was only 6 months old. Now, she is 7, and the pain of that loss still lingers as a wound that never heals. Mike's death came just 2 days after my birthday, a coincidence I will likely never forget. That moment shattered me completely. Losing Mike, I lost direction in life, and I turned to alcohol to numb the pain, whenever Sammy stayed with her grandparents. I was not a good mother, not a woman who could keep her family together. The reality was, I had fallen into a spiral of despair. I never touched drugs, but I had thought about it as an escape. I had anger issues, and I was losing control, though I always tried not to show it in front of Sammy. But it was undeniable that my parents and sister were the ones who suffered the most. With all of these issues, I lost my job, ruined many friendships, and couldn't fulfill my duties as a mother. I didn't realize how far off track I had gone until my parents decided they couldn't stand watching me destroy myself anymore. They forced me to go into therapy and rehabilitation. This wasn't a choice I made, but a decision of theirs, or they would sue for custody of my daughter. I knew at that time I wasn't in a position to protect myself, let alone my daughter. If they had followed through, I would have certainly lost. The therapy program and the incredible support from my family were the factors that helped me change. Since then, I have been rebuilding my life, restoring myself, and finding some light in that dark time. I don't claim to be perfect, but at least I have become a responsible mother, a woman who can provide a better life for my daughter. My ex-in-laws, after overcoming their own losses and difficulties, decided to gift me their house, a truly meaningful gift. The house has 4 bedrooms, and the special thing is that they were preparing to move into an assisted living facility, where they would receive the care they need as they approach old age. For me, receiving this gift was not just financial help, but also a way to preserve the precious memories of Mike. His room was kept exactly as it was before we got married, as if he was still there. Every time I walk into that room, I feel as though part of him is still with me, helping me to keep going and continue raising my daughter. It's not just a room, it's a legacy of love and memories. My sister moved in with me to help, not only emotionally but also financially. She helped me pay bills, which allowed me to continue my studies and work part-time. She works from home and voluntarily cares for Sammy whenever I have class or work. This not only helped me ease the burden but also gave me the opportunity to focus on my studies and self-development. With my sister's support, I felt like I had the strength to face any difficulty. I only had 1 year left to finish my degree, and I already had a job waiting for me at her company. That was a big step, not only for my career but also for my little family. At 24, while in university, I met a graduate student named Andrew, a 29-year-old guy who tutored me in subjects I struggled with, especially math, a subject I always found very difficult and stressful. He was very enthusiastic and kind, and this made me feel safe around him. He always listened to me and gave sincere advice. Over time, we developed feelings for each other and decided to start dating. From the very beginning, I was open about my past. I was a widow. I had gone through a recovery process after quitting alcohol, and most importantly, I had a daughter that I loved and always put first. Andrew, with his maturity and understanding, took everything I shared with him and was very supportive. He not only cared for me but also wanted to meet Sammy, but I decided to respect my daughter's safety first. Sammy was only 4 years old at the time, and I thought that before we got serious, I needed to make sure everything was solid. After 5 months of dating, when I felt our relationship was strong enough, I decided to introduce Andrew to Sammy. When they met for the first time, I realized that Andrew was truly wonderful. He not only cared for me but also took care of and loved my daughter as if she were his own. Their relationship developed very naturally, and I could trust that my daughter would have a good father figure, even though he wasn't her biological father. Andrew truly did well in his role as a companion and a father figure to my daughter, Sammy. He spent time taking her camping, playing her favorite games, and helping her with homework. He always showed care and attention, especially with the little details of Sammy's daily life. In Sammy's eyes, Andrew was not just my boyfriend, but also an exemplary father figure, always ready to share love and care. Their relationship developed so naturally, and I genuinely felt at peace letting my daughter be with him. At least at the beginning, everything was perfect, and I felt that Andrew was someone I could trust to become part of our family. However, things began to change after a trip Andrew took about 1.5 years ago. He visited a friend in Ohio, and although I didn't know the full details, after his return, I could sense a difference in his behavior. Andrew's friend held extremely outdated views about the role of women in the family, believing that women should only have children, take care of the house, and obey their husbands as if the husband were a god. For me, this was absolutely unacceptable. However, since this friend was a longtime friend of Andrew's, I didn't want to rush to judgment or assume that he would change his views based on those negative ideas. I still believed that if Andrew had not changed before, I had no reason to worry. But when Andrew returned from his trip, things seemed to shift a little. He still treated me well, showing love and care, but I began to notice signs of a change in his thinking about women's roles, particularly in the family. It became clearer when I asked him if he could watch Sammy for an afternoon while I took my sister home from a medical procedure. Andrew, still very eager, agreed immediately, and I thought everything would be fine. However, when my sister and I returned home, I was met with a sight I couldn't believe. Andrew was sitting on the couch drinking beer, while Sammy sat on the floor, crying hysterically with a serious burn on her hand. I rushed over to my daughter, asking what had happened and why she was hurt. What angered me even more was that Andrew hadn't tended to Sammy's wound or taken her to the hospital. He just shrugged and said something that made me feel like I was being slapped in the face. I told her to make dinner for me. "It's not my fault, you didn't teach your daughter how to be a woman properly." When I heard that, I felt like I had been slapped across the face. At that moment, I realized that Andrew hadn't just changed in his behavior, he was also starting to express completely inappropriate views on gender and women's roles in the family. He didn't just blame me, but also put the blame on me for not teaching Sammy how to be a woman the right way. These words upset and disappointed me because I had worked so hard to raise my daughter to be strong, independent, and confident, not to be a submissive tool. This incident made it clear to me that Andrew was not the man I thought he was. Instead of loving and caring for my daughter, he began showing sexist views and disrespectful attitudes toward both me and Sammy. This event made me reconsider my relationship with Andrew, and I realized I couldn't continue with someone who held such thoughts and behaved this way. At first, I was completely stunned and couldn't believe what had just happened. It felt as if everything suddenly collapsed right in front of me. But one thing I knew for sure was that my daughter, Sammy, was my top priority. Even though I felt confused and angry, I couldn't let any emotions control my actions in that moment. I picked up my daughter without saying a word, refusing to let myself be drawn into Andrew's hurtful words. As I quickly left, I still heard Andrew's voice, continuing to say things like, "You know I'm right, babe, and I didn't say you could leave. This is a lesson for her." These words rang in my head like slaps to my reason, but I didn't let them steal my composure. The drive back home was eerily quiet, except for Sammy sobbing next to my sister. She kept comforting and soothing her, but I knew the emotional wound on Sammy's heart wouldn't heal easily. While driving, I couldn't stop thinking about everything. In my head, a phrase in Italian kept repeating, a language my sister and I had both learned since childhood, but I hadn't taught Sammy yet. The phrase came out unconsciously, as if I needed to remind myself of something important: "You need to get away from that man tonight." When we arrived at the hospital, Sammy was immediately attended to by the doctors. Her burn was a second-degree burn, while a part of the injury on her leg was a first-degree burn. Luckily, her pants had partially protected her. But even though the injuries weren't too severe, the emotional pain Sammy had to endure was something that couldn't be measured by any level of burns. I felt drained, exhausted, and wanted to give up everything. That night, all I wanted was to collapse on the bed and forget everything, because I had gone through so much emotion and hurt throughout the day. After taking care of Sammy, I left her with my parents and told them the story. At that moment, I felt I needed some time to quiet down and regain my composure. I returned home with my sister, where Andrew was still sitting on the couch, completely unconcerned or remorseful about what he had done. He had finished 3 bottles of beer, and there was 1 bottle left, proving that he didn't care about what was going on around him. What made me even angrier was that when we got home, he didn't even get up to greet us, just coldly said, "Are you sober now?" That comment hit me hard, as it showed his indifference and lack of responsibility. At that point, I had no patience left. I demanded that he leave immediately, and if he didn't, I would call the police. He responded with a smug attitude, "As your man, I have rights over your property." That statement made me feel like I was facing a selfish and irresponsible person. I was so close to losing control, but thankfully, my sister acted before I did. She quickly grabbed a broom and began forcefully chasing Andrew out of the house, like in those old cartoons we used to watch as kids. Once she had gotten him out the back door, she locked it and told me to call the police. She knew I couldn't face him alone anymore. When the police arrived and checked Andrew's documents, they ordered him to leave the house. But even though he was kicked out, the consequences of this incident were far from over. An investigation by CPS was initiated, and I felt completely overwhelmed. Every moment filled me with worry about my daughter's safety and the accusations I might face. I felt like I was on the edge of a breakdown, and everything seemed like it could crumble at any moment. For the first time in months, I felt like I could turn to alcohol to cope with the pain, but my sister wouldn't let that happen. She was the one who kept me strong, preventing me from falling back into that trap. Even though Andrew was arrested, he only received a light penalty and didn't have to serve any time in prison. This felt extremely unfair, as his actions had harmed not just Sammy but also me. But I knew that, no matter what happened, I had to keep standing strong to protect my daughter and not let the past harm us any further. Despite trying my best to move on, I realized I couldn't let the past and old wounds continue haunting me. I never thought about dating after breaking up with Andrew. Although it had been more than a year, I didn't dare risk a new relationship. The feeling of safety and protection for my daughter was the most important thing to me right now, and I didn't want to face anyone who might bring more pain or trouble into our lives. Sammy, though still young, had already experienced difficult and scary situations. Therefore, I decided to take her to therapy to help her deal with the emotional trauma she had gone through. At the same time, I organized mom, aunt, daughter sessions to teach Sammy important life skills, like kitchen safety. We spent time bonding, rebuilding trust, and healing emotional wounds. However, even though I tried to protect our lives, Andrew kept harassing us. He continued to post hostile and offensive comments on social media. Every post felt like a punch to the face, as he accused me of stealing his only daughter and claimed that my relationship with Sammy was improper. His words didn't stop there. He even called me jealous, petty, an adulterer, and an abusive mother, even though we were never married. These were the kind of words that would hurt anyone, but I couldn't let myself get caught up in his negativity. Over time, he became more entrenched in ridiculous accusations and invaded our privacy. He posted edited old photos, cutting me out of outings with Sammy to create a false narrative, making everyone believe I was hiding something terrible. Even though many people on social media agreed with him, they weren't close to me. They were strangers, people who had never met me or understood the story from both sides. I felt pressured and isolated in a world where everyone only saw the surface issue without trying to uncover the truth. It was precisely because of these unfounded accusations that CPS had to visit my house multiple times. They repeatedly investigated claims of abuse and the possibility that I was keeping Sammy close to dangerous people. One of the most serious allegations was that he said I was keeping an easily accessible weapon. But the truth was, I had a gun safe with hunting rifles, securely locked with an electronic code that only my sister and I knew. Its location was safe, on the attic, where Sammy couldn't reach it. I also kept a personal handgun in my room, which was also safely secured with a different code that only I knew. I always ensured my daughter's safety, and these weapons were for emergency defense. But none of this mattered to him. He just focused on creating false stories to stir worry and fear. CPS stopped paying attention to the accusations against me and my sister because they realized those were baseless claims. However, the police couldn't do much because CPS's reports were anonymous, and Andrew hadn't really done anything beyond posting on social media. He hadn't directly harmed us but was behind poisonous words that made everyone misunderstand me. Still, the private messages I received were clear enough to know he was referring to me in private conversations. This made me feel like I was being watched, as if Andrew was somewhere, always keeping track of my every move. The feeling of stress and anxiety overwhelmed me every day. I felt like I was living in an unsafe world. Sometimes I couldn't escape the feeling of being followed, and I was terrified to be alone at night. I wondered if he could know my address, if he could do worse just to get back at me. The police didn't take me seriously. They didn't have enough evidence to act, and I felt like I was abandoned in a situation with no one to protect me. I grew even more worried thinking that Sammy might be feeling my anxiety. I couldn't let her feel unsafe, and I certainly couldn't let Andrew's irrational actions hurt her anymore. My life has been filled with many challenges and pain, but every day, I try to stay strong, not only for myself but for my daughter, Sammy. Even though I face constant harassment from my ex, false accusations, and the feeling of being watched, I refuse to let myself collapse. The lesson I've learned is that sometimes in life, we have to face bad things, but the most important thing is not to let those challenges define us. We have the right to control our own lives and protect our loved ones. Resilience, courage, and unconditional love are the greatest strengths that help me overcome everything. My story is a reminder that, no matter what, we must find our inner strength and always keep faith in the future, because the road ahead, though full of obstacles, can always open up new opportunities if we stay persistent.